Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Likon Onobanjo. Here are stories making rounds beyond the continent. Let's begin by telling you that a federal judge has temporarily halted the Donald Trump administration's ban on Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs ruled hours after the nation's oldest and wealthiest college filed suit on Friday. Harvard argued that the revocation of its certification in the Student and Exchange Visitor Program was clear retaliation for its refusal of the government's ideologically rooted policy demands. Burroughs is the same judge considering a separate lawsuit from Harvard challenging the administration's freeze of $2.65 billion in federal funding. The latest complaints by the nation's oldest and wealthiest institution of higher education argues the decision to drop the school from the Department of Homeland Security's system violates the law. Still on the Trump administration's face-off with Harvard University, let's remind you that the Department of Homeland Security had accused Harvard of fostering anti-Semitism and demanding detailed information on international students. Harvard emphasized that international students constitute about 27% of its student body. Judge Allison Burroughs, who is also overseeing a separate case involving the administration's freeze of $2.65 billion in federal funding to Harvard, scheduled hearings for May 27 and 29 to further address the matter. Now, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said on Friday that educational cooperation between China and the United States is mutually beneficial. Spokesman Mao Ning made the remarks at a daily press briefing when asked to comment on the Trump administration's decision to revoke Harvard University's ability to enroll international students. Mao also stated that China has always opposed the politicization of educational cooperation, noting that relevant practices of the U.S. side will only damage the image and international credibility of itself. Mao said China will firmly safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese students, including scholars overseas. Let's equally tell you that German officials on Friday avoided direct criticism of the United States over the Trump administration's move to ban international students from Harvard University. Asked about the U.S. decision, German government spokesperson Sebastian Hiller offered a general comment that didn't refer explicitly to Harvard, the U.S. or Trump. He said that free academia, of course, belongs to the core of liberal democratic societies. Restrictions on academic freedom are restrictions on democracy itself. German Foreign Ministry spokesperson Christian Wagner said the ministry knows of a three-digit number of Germans studying at Harvard. He didn't offer a more specific figure. Meanwhile, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul says the European Union's Executive Commission has his country's full support in working to preserve the bloc's access to the U.S. markets. Wadephul made the comments during a joint press conference with India's Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar after President Donald Trump threatened a 50% tax on all imports from the European Union, as well as a 25% tariff on Apple products, unless iPhones are made in America. The German DAX Talks Index suffered heavy losses following Trump's remarks.
Obliegt der Europäischen Kommission. Sie hat unsere volle Unterstützung, indem sie unsere Zugänge zu dem amerikanischen Markt bewahren will. Und ich glaube, derartige Zölle helfen niemandem, sondern führen nur dazu, dass die wirtschaftliche Entwicklung in beiden Märkten darunter leiden würde. Und deswegen setzen wir weiter auf Verhandlungen und unterstützen die Europäische Kommission dabei, Europa und den europäischen Markt zu verteidigen und gleichzeitig Überzeugungskraft in Amerika zu entfalten.
India has zero tolerance for terrorism. India will never give in to nuclear blackmail. And India will deal with Pakistan purely bilaterally. There should be no confusion in any quarter in that regard. We also value Germany's understanding that every nation has the right to defend itself against terrorism.
Wir waren alle schwer erschüttert, dass Indien am 22. April Ziel eines brutalen Terrorangriffs geworden ist. Wir haben diesen Angriff auf Zivilisten auf das Schärfste verurteilt. Unser Beileid gilt allen Opfern und Angehörigen. Dass es nun nach dem militärischen Schlagabtausch und dem Recht Indiens, sich gegen Terrorismus zu verteidigen, zu einem Waffenstillstand gekommen ist, begrüßen wir sehr. Entscheidend ist nun, dass dieser Waffenstillstand stabil bleibt und Dialog stattfindet.
We tell you that Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba says he has held telephone talks with U.S. President Donald Trump and agreed to hold productive discussion at an upcoming tariff talks between their countries. Ishiba said Japan's position to keep pushing Washington to drop all recent tariff measures is unchanged, and that it stands by plans to push for Japanese investments to create more jobs in the U.S. in exchange. The two leaders held talks just after Economic Revitalization Minister Yoshie Akazawa, Japan's chief tariff negotiator, headed to Washington for a third round of talks with his U.S. counterparts. In the earlier rounds of talks, the U.S. has not agreed to the Japanese requests.
アメリカの関税措置にかかる我が国の立場を伝えました。で、関税をめぐる日米協議について、まさしく今、赤澤さんがアメリカに向かっておるところでありまして、閣僚級協議と、これが実施予定であるということを伝えました上で、閣僚間におきまして、生産的な協議が行われるということを期待しているというふうに申し上げ、で、私どもとして関税措置の撤廃ということを求めていくということに変わりはありませんが、我々としてアメリカに対してどのような投資を行っていくか、これはもう今まで申し上げたことでございますが、関税よりも投資であるということ、アメリカにいかにして雇用というものを生み出していくかということについて、日米で協力をするという方針に何ら変わりはございません。
In response to Japan's seizure of a Chinese fishing boat from Taiwan, reportedly Honghatu No. 6, China has lodged stern representations with Japan. This is according to Mao Ning, spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, on Friday, noting that China demands that Japan immediately correct its wrongdoings and take effective measures to prevent similar incidents. Yang made the remarks at a regular press briefing when asked whether China had lodged representations over Japan's seizure of the Chinese fishing boat.
中国政府高度重视维护包括台湾地区在内中国渔民的合法权益。根据中日渔业协定，日方无权在有关水域对中方渔船采取执法措施。针对此次日方抓扣红彩头6号渔船，中方已向日方提出严正交涉，要求其立即纠正错误做法，并采取有效措施，防止类似事件再次发生。
Away from that, Yemen's Houthi group on Friday claimed responsibility for launching a hypersonic ballistic missile attack on Ben Gurion Airport in central Israel, which was reportedly intercepted by Israeli defense systems earlier in the day. Houthi military spokesperson Yahya Sarrier said in a statement aired by Houthi-run Al Masira TV that the missile targeted Ben Gurion Airport. Earlier in the day, the Israel Defense Forces said that sirens sounded across Israel following a projectile launched from Yemen, which was later intercepted. Israel's emergency service, Majin David Adom, said that no casualties or damage were reported. This was the third missile attack claimed by the Houthis against Ben Gurion Airport in central Israel in 24 hours. On Thursday, Israeli media reported the interception of 2 projectiles fired from Yemen. The Houthis have been targeting Israel and Israeli-linked ships since November 2023 to show solidarity with Palestinians amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Last week, the Houthis said they would intensify missile attacks against Ben Gurion Airport an Haifa port in Israel in response to the resumption of the extensive Israeli military offensive in Gaza. Let's now take a break on Beyond the Continent. When we return, U.S. and Iran delegations leave Rome after fifth round of nuclear talks. We'll bring you the details in a bit. Stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres on Friday said Palestinians in Gaza are enduring what may be the cruelest phase of this cruel conflict as Israel wraps up its military offensive. Guterres, in a statement, said that for nearly 80 days, Israel blocked the entry of life-saving international aid and that the entire population of Gaza is facing the risk of famine. Israel resumed major operations in Gaza on March 18, ending a 2-month ceasefire. Aid began trickling into the Gaza Strip this week for the first time in more than 2 months. But Guterres warned that of almost 400 trucks cleared for entry into Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing, supplies from only 115 have been able to be collected.
Are enduring what may be the cruelest phase of this cruel conflict. For nearly 80 days, Israel blocked the entry of life-saving international aid. As the world's leading hunger assessment found, the entire population of Gaza is facing the risk of famine. Families are being starved and denied the very basics, all with the world watching in real time.
And now talking about nuclear negotiations, Iranian and U.S. negotiators have left the residence of the Omani ambassador in Rome after a fifth round of nuclear talks following a public disagreement over Tehran's uranium enrichment. The talks, which began in April, are the highest level contact between the foes since the United States quit a landmark 2015 nuclear accord during President Donald Trump's first term. The embassy, which is located in the Italian capital, Camiluca neighborhood, previously served as the site of another round of talks. The delegation cars were seen just after 1 p.m. and the Iranian media just before 2 p.m. announced the talks had begun without elaborating. U.S. officials up to President Donald Trump insist Iran cannot continue to enrich uranium at all in any deal that could see sanctions lifted on Tehran's struggling economy. And away from that, Ukraine and Russia began a major prisoner exchange on Friday, which, if completed, would be the biggest swap since Moscow invaded more than 3 years ago. Both sides received 390 people in the first stage on Friday and are expected to exchange 1,000 each in total under an agreement reached at direct talks in Istanbul last week. Kyiv said that the process is set to last 3 days. The enemies have held regular exchanges since Russia launched its 2022 attack, but none have been of this scale. Russia said it had received 270 Russian troops and 120 civilians, including some from parts of Kursk region that were captured and held by Kyiv for months.
Сьогоднішній день головне відбувся обмін. І це перший етап найбільшого обміну, про який домовились в Туреччині. Фактично єдиний значимий результат зустрічі в Туреччині. Все інше росіяни блокують. Поки що блокують. Але повернення наших людей – це саме те, заради чого ми завжди працюємо.
In the meantime, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says a drone barrage launched on Russia from Ukraine is an obvious attempt to disrupt peace negotiations. Russia's defense ministry says it's downed 112 Ukrainian drones in a third night of attacks, with Moscow again targeted with strikes that disrupted operations at several airports. The ministry said since Thursday evening, air defense systems destroyed and intercepted 112 Ukrainian drones, including 24 that were headed towards the capital.
Переговоры и подорвать тот процесс, который был начат в Стамбуле по итогам договоренности между президентом Путиным и президентом Трампом. С 20 мая и по 8 часов утра сегодняшнего дня, 23 мая, украинская сторона осуществила запуск рекордного количества боевых беспилотников, 788, по гражданским целям и мирным гражданам Российской Федерации. Все атаки были отражены, хотя, к сожалению, есть погибшие и...
Now, record floodwaters on Australia's east coast have left 4 people dead and 1 missing. This is according to officials on Friday as rain eased over the disaster area. Some 50,000 people have been isolated by flooding along the coast of New South Wales, state north of Sydney, after days of heavy rain. The low-pressure weather system that brought the deluge had moved further south to Sydney and its surrounding areas on Friday. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and New South Wales Premier Christopher Means on Friday were inspecting devastated communities, some of which had been inundated by the highest flood waters on record.
This is an incredibly tough time, and the heart of Australians goes out to those people who are going through this difficult period. But the rest of Australia stands with you as well, and will provide whatever support is necessary.
An amazing, heroic logistical effort where in very difficult circumstances many volunteers put themselves in harm's way to rescue a complete stranger, and over the coming days and weeks we will hear scores of stories of locals being plucked out of impossible, desperate situations. So of course we mourn the people that have passed, but I do think it's important to say without the SES, without the volunteers, we would have had hundreds of deaths, and we're in deep, deep gratitude to those people who volunteered their time.
Now, the UK government is introducing a pilot program in 20 prisons to assess the use of chemical castration as a treatment for sex offenders. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood announced that the treatment, which involves medication to suppress sexual urges, will be tested as part of broader criminal justice reforms aimed at reducing reoffending and addressing prison overcrowding. The initiative follows a review by former Justice Secretary David Goke and is inspired by similar programs in countries like Germany, Denmark, and Poland.
A review to consider how we manage sex offenders. The review has recommended we continue a pilot of so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal. I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible. Of course, it is vital that this approach is taken alongside psychological interventions that target other causes of offending, like asserting power and control.
Well, record floodwaters on Australia's east coast have left 4 people dead and 1 missing, and this is according to officials on Friday as rain eased over the disaster area. Some 50,000 people have been isolated by flooding along the coast of New South Wales state north of Sydney after days of heavy rain. The low-pressure weather system that brought the deluge had moved further south to Sydney and its surrounding areas on Friday. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and New South Wales Premier Christopher Means on Friday were inspecting devastated communities, some of which had been inundated by flood.
Historic proportions has brought devastation to eastern Australia, where record-breaking floods have killed at least 3 people and stranded more than 50,000 others. In just 3 days, parts of New South Wales have been drenched by more than half a year's worth of rain, transforming creeks into raging rivers and cutting off entire communities. Emergency services have launched massive search and rescue operations. One elderly couple was winched to safety from the roof of their car. Others climbed atop highway bridges, waiting for rescue by Navy helicopters. In the farming town of Kempsey, more than 20,000 residents are isolated. The local mayor described the sound of the rain as deafening and horrible. In rural areas, dead cattle have washed up on beaches, carried by torrents from pastures inland. Experts say the abnormally warm oceans surrounding Australia are intensifying these storms. With more moisture in the atmosphere, rain falls harder and faster. Australia's Emergency Management Minister confirmed that climate change is amplifying extreme weather events. More than 2,500 emergency personnel have been deployed, along with boats, drones and helicopters. The flooding has officially been declared a natural disaster, unlocking urgent aid. Forecasters expect rain to taper off by late Thursday, but for tens of thousands of Australians, the recovery is just beginning. While the rains are finally expected to ease, the scale of the damage is only just coming into focus, with homes destroyed, livestock lost, and entire communities cut off. With climate change fueling more frequent extreme weather, Australians are once again left to pick up the pieces after another record-breaking disaster. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
On Beyond the Continent, do remember you can send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. And do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Watch us live on DSTV channel 422, GoTV channel 23, Star Times channel 274, Arvo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Lekon Obanjo.